Welcome everybody to another edition of Virginia Wine and Song, the Virginia YouTube channel where we pair a Virginia wine or winery, wine and winery I should say, with an underrated piece of music from the classic rock era or the classic pop era, which I have defined as between 1964 and 1999. That's just my definition. Everybody has their own definition, but that's mine. I have a new camera. My previous camera decided to kick the bucket. So I'm trying a different camera, so that's maybe why it may be a little grainy. I did a couple of tests, so we'll see how this goes. Hopefully I won't have to buy another camera because I found this camera in a drawer, and I've had it lying around for a couple of years and never really used it. So I'm going to try to use it now. So anyway, hope you enjoy this. We're going to start talking about we're going to talk about the wine first, like I normally do. And we are going to talk about wine today, Virginia wine, and not something else. I'm not going off on another tangent with movies or something else. I'm going to talk about Virginia wine, and then we're going to get into the music or the album. So the winery I'm going to talk about today is another winery that's in the Shenandoah Valley. I apologize. I promise to go out to a couple more wineries in other areas of the state this summer, but right now I'm going to hit a winery that is actually close to a fairly populated area. It's very close to Harrisonburg. Harrisonburg is the largest city in the Shenandoah Valley. At last check, I think Harrisonburg population was about 54,000 people because it has James Madison University nearby, a lot of students there, so that pumps up the population. This winery is about maybe a 10-minute or 15-minute drive from JMU. It's very popular with JMU students who, of course, are of age, 21 and over. It's very popular for Parents' Weekend because parents like to have wine as well. There are a lot of students who actually work at the winery. I went there last weekend, and I'm pretty sure that the individuals working behind the tasting bar were 21 and over, probably graduate students, or they could be, I guess, undergrads as well, but they were definitely over 21 to be working at a winery. So, Cross Keys is the name of the winery. Cross Keys is very close to the Cross Keys battlefield. There was actually a Civil War battle that was fought, the Battle of Cross Keys. I'm not really sure why it's called Cross Keys. I didn't go to the battlefield. I guess I would find out if I went there. But the winery is called Cross Keys as well. Like I said, about 15 minutes away from James Madison University, and it is a very slick operation. I don't mind wineries that look slick and kind of corporate and kind of ostentatious in a way. That's not kind of a negative term to use. I wouldn't really call it that. It's very. They've got their act together, and they even have a hostess or a host stand, a host or a hostess who are waiting to seat people, because they also have a bistro. This winery operates as a winery, and it operates as a bistro. Now, the winery opened, I believe the winery opened in like 2005 or 2006, somewhere around there, and it was only a winery back then. The laws changed around 2012 or 2013 to allow the wineries to also offer food. Prior to the laws changing, the wineries could not offer food except for the usual, cheese and crackers that they were selling in the refrigerators. They could offer that, but they couldn't have a full-fledged kitchen. But those laws changed around 2012 and 2013, so now a lot of the wineries do have a kitchen, and they offer, in some cases, pretty elaborate menus, almost like I said, almost like a restaurant. This place advertises itself as a winery and a bistro. I personally like the winery side of it, and they still do counter tastings. Counter tastings are something that a lot of the wineries are doing away with, unfortunately. They never got out of the pandemic. That was a big thing to do during the pandemic, have what they call flights, where you can just go up to the tasting bar or whatever, and then you were handed a couple of flights of wine. When the pandemic ended, a lot of the wineries kept that model in place. Some wineries offer both flights and a counter tasting. I don't know of any wineries that just do a counter tasting. Maybe there are a couple out there that just do a counter tasting. They're probably very small wineries that do that. But the larger wineries, especially the ones that also operate as a restaurant, basically, will probably have flights. But Cross Keys has both, flights and a counter tasting. You can stand at the counter with other people, strangers or your friends or whoever may be there, and interact with the staff as they bring you to the different types of wines. They have a white wine counter tasting, they have a red wine counter tasting, and they have a mixture, I think about 14 different wines to try, red and white. Today I'm going to talk about the Viognier. Viognier is one of their whites, and Viognier is probably, in fact not probably, I think it's pretty much well known at this point that Viognier is the Virginia signature white grape. Viognier has been very popular in Virginia since wineries started operating. And this, what I feel about Viognier, either I really like them or I don't. I think it depends on your mood. At least for me, either I'm in the mood for Viognier or I'm not. If I have a really, really good Viognier, which I think this Viognier was actually good at Cross Keys, obviously I bought it. I really like it. But I've been underwhelmed by a lot of Viogniers as well. But this one I thought was really, really good. They also have Chardonnay. They actually have two Chardonnays. Very, very similar, but just a little bit of difference. One Chardonnay had a little bit of fig and a little apricot on the finish, and the other Chardonnay was a little more fruit forward with a little more honeysuckle type thing going on. So their white wines are pretty much the standard whites you would see at most wineries. Chardonnays, they have one called Joy White, which is kind of an off-dry, off-sweet wine. I'm not really a big fan of that style, but Joy White is very popular. They even sell that at grocery stores. Viognier, of course, they have a Sauv Blanc, and the Sauv Blanc is actually not like your typical New Zealand Sauv Blanc. It's actually got less of a bite. I think a lot of the New Zealand Sauv Blancs have an edge or a bite to them. This one is pretty smooth. They also have a rosé called Fiori. The rosé is really great to have, especially in the summertime if it's chilled. And they also have an ice wine. It's not really an ice wine. It's a ice wine clone because they can't really do ice wine in Virginia. So what they do is they pick the grapes, they put the grapes in a freezer, and they make it in an ice wine style, but it's not a true ice wine. And it's called Ali. And that actually was really good. I actually like that more than the Joy White. Even though ice wines usually have a tendency to be sweeter, Ali, which is a small, kind of a skinny bottle, like I said, after meal dessert wine type of bottle. I thought it was really, really good. It had a real kind of a taste of a little bit of a butterscotch feel to it. Like I said, I liked it. Even though it was on the sweet side, it was not as cloyingly sweet as the Joy White. Again, some people like sweet wines. That's not my thing. For the reds, pretty much expect what you get in Virginia wineries for reds. Cab Franc. They have a couple of Cab Francs. They've got a Cab Franc regular and a reserve. They have one called Joy Red, which is a table version of their red wine. It's not as sweet as the Joy White. It's a standard table wine that you can have that probably with chili or a pasta dish or pizza even. They're a member of the Meritage Club, and just look up what Meritage is all about. You have to be a paying member to have a Meritage, or at least use that name Meritage, which is a blend. Meritage is usually 5 blends, 5 different wines. Typically it's a Cab Franc, a Merlot, Petit Verdot, and Cab Sauv, and something else. Sometimes they use Chambourcin. I've seen Chambourcin being used in Meritage. I've seen Tannat being used in Meritage. So basically 5 distinct reds make up a Meritage wine. Meritage, not a Meritage. Meritage. A Meritage with the A in front of it. That's if they don't want to join the club, but they want to be kind of crafty. I've seen that happen where they put an A in front of Meritage. You're not fooling anybody that's not a member. You're not a member of the Meritage Club. A straight Meritage, you have to pay to be a member of that club. They have a Petit Verdot. They have a Touriga. Touriga is actually kind of unusual for Virginia, but they got a Touriga that does really well in South Africa. And they have a Ruby, which is kind of a port style. So something for everyone, including a rosé. And they have to have something for everyone because they're so close to James Madison University. So Cross Keys, this is a great winery to go to in the springtime. I went there in the middle of April. April is a great time to do wineries in general, as long as it's not too hot or too cold. It can be either too hot or too cold in April. Right now, it's kind of right where April needs to be. It's about 78 degrees outside, maybe a little warmer than we're used to having in April. But still, I'll take it. April is a great time to do the wineries, especially if it's not humid. And what music or what album goes with with a wine that is best enjoyed, or you can really have a good time with this wine in this winery in the spring? Cross Keys in Harrisonburg, outside of Harrisonburg. Technically, it's Mount Crawford, which is a town outside of Harrisonburg, but that's the postal address of this winery. But it's really Harrisonburg. It's 15 minutes away. Anyway, the album that I'm going to put with this, because of the word April, the month of April, and also the woman's name, April, I'm going to choose an album that has a song on there called April, April Come She Will. April Come She Will. This is Simon & Garfunkel, and this is the album, Sounds of Silence. This is not considered to be one of their classic albums. They only had 5 studio albums, Simon & Garfunkel. This is their second. This is their second studio album of 5. And at least 3 of those 5 albums are largely considered to be masterpieces. Okay, they, meaning critics by and large, they typically don't choose this one, maybe because it's, there are a couple of songs on here that were on the previous album. They just kind of redid them for this album. Sounds of Silence, of course, the song was Sounds of Silence. I think, if you were to rank the 100 greatest pop songs of all time, the Sounds of Silence has to be in there. I mean, everybody knows that song. That song has even been sampled by rap artists. So everybody knows the Sounds of Silence. That's the first song on this album. The other hit on this album is I Am a Rock, which I'm sure a lot of people know that song as well. This album, just like a lot of bands and a lot of duos, Simon & Garfunkel at the time, they were just getting started as sort of like the next Everly Brothers. In fact, they covered a couple of Everly Brothers songs during their touring. Simon & Garfunkel ended up becoming more successful than the Everly Brothers as the most successful duo of all time. And they had that record until Hall & Oates came out in the 80s, and Hall & Oates kind of blew them away as a duo. So Hall & Oates now is considered to be the most successful duo of all time. But for a while, Simon & Garfunkel was. And they sell a lot of albums. They still do. Sell a lot of albums. This album, just like other albums from the 60s, they've got, they're kind of posturing on the back with some interesting, hip poses by Paul Simon and Art Garfunkel. This is a Legacy remaster. Now, Legacy is a subsidiary of Columbia Records. Legacy is sort of like the remaster label of Columbia. And back in probably 2012 or 13 or so, they put out all 5 studio records by Simon & Garfunkel on heavy gram vinyl. This is a heavy gram vinyl. Columbia Records is the original Columbia label from the 60s. So they did everything they could to make it look similar to how it was when it first came out. This album came out, I believe, in 1964. So right there at the cusp of the beginning of the rock era, maybe 64, 65. One of those 2 years, I think. Too bad I don't know that by heart. But the album was so successful, this album was on the charts for like over 2 years. So even though it's not rated as one of Simon & Garfunkel's greatest albums, it was extremely successful, mainly because of the song Sounds of Silence, the Sounds of Silence, and I Am a Rock. Richard Corey is on here, and that's kind of an adaptation of an old English poem, and they kind of adapted that into a song. A lot of these songs on this album are very much influenced by Bob Dylan. Bob Dylan was in the air big time around this time. Okay, 1965. That's when this album came out, 65. There's a song on here called Blessed. Blessed is actually as close to Bob Dylan as you can get without being Bob Dylan. Okay, it's heavy. It's got that heavier, when Bob Dylan went electric on the Bringing It All Back Home album. It's got that electric feeling. For a Simon & Garfunkel song, the song Blessed is pretty heavy. I mean, it's not Jimi Hendrix, let's face the facts. It's not that. But it is for them, especially for an early album. It's a heavy album, a heavy song. But like I said, very much influenced by Bob Dylan. It's also got April Come She Will on here. And the one thing I want to mention about this album, as well as the couple of albums that followed Simon & Garfunkel in their studio album catalog, the movie The Graduate. Okay, the movie The Graduate came out in 1967. Okay, this is a bonus. I'm gonna go ahead and focus on this album as a bonus. This is the soundtrack to the movie The Graduate from 1967, and it's mostly by songs by Simon & Garfunkel, but it's also got songs on here by Dave Grusin. Dave Grusin was a jazz musician, very popular in the late 60s and early 70s, and he did a lot of the instrumental work for the movie The Graduate. So those songs or those cuts are on here as well. So this is really a score to the movie, but it's also got the songs by Simon & Garfunkel that were popular, made even more popular, I should say, by this movie.
The Sounds of Silence, of course, that's heard over the opening credits of the movie The Graduate. You also got Scarborough Fair, which is from the album that came out after this album. And then you also have, of course, Mrs. Robinson. And Mrs. Robinson is on this album, and it's not the studio version of Mrs. Robinson, it's not the hit version, it's actually variations of Mrs. Robinson, because Mrs. Robinson was the real theme song of the movie. But you never hear that song in its entirety as we heard on the radio. So it's just bits and pieces of the song. They did that a lot. Movies that were released in the late 60s, Midnight Cowboy is another example. They have one or two songs that they use over and over again in different variations of that. That made kind of late 60s movies kind of interesting. And what was also interesting about this is on the back of the back cover of the Graduate soundtrack, we have a whole essay about the movie. And my parents had this album, and I kind of borrowed it and never really gave it back after I borrowed it when I was a kid. And I hadn't even seen the movie yet, but I read the back cover of talking about, not the plot necessarily, but more about the characters. And the Dustin Hoffman character, what he goes through, and the Catherine Ross character, and the Anne Bancroft character. Mrs. Robinson was played by Anne Bancroft. And you read the essay, and you almost feel like you've seen the movie, even though it doesn't really talk about the plot. They did a lot of interesting things with albums back in the 60s. They really made it worth your while to buy these records, because they were just full of wonderful artwork. This, of course, is the poster from the movie The Graduate. Mrs. Robinson's nylon leg there in front of Dustin Hoffman, who's looking pretty confused. If you've seen the movie, you know what I mean. And this is an album, I got this used. This is not part of the Legacy series of remastered vinyl. I got this used at a used vinyl shop about 20 years ago. And it's also on the original Columbia label. This is the Columbia Gray label. This is the label that Columbia used for classical recordings and also for soundtracks. So it was kind of interesting to have kind of a rock/pop album, jazz also, on the Columbia Gray label, but it was. So that's the Graduate soundtrack, a bonus album, in addition to The Sounds of Silence by Simon & Garfunkel. Before I go, one more treat about Simon & Garfunkel, because for some reason they just remind me of the spring. Again, April come she will, I guess. This is a box set. Now this was put out by Legacy, the company I mentioned before, which is a subsidiary of Columbia Records. They put this out in 2004, and this is remasterings of all of their albums, everything they did, including their greatest hits collections and their concerts. They did a couple of concert albums as well. So the albums that are on this set, and I think you can get it. I bought it from Amazon about 10 years ago. It was about $35, and that's a great deal. $35 for every single album, including the greatest hits album and the live albums that Simon & Garfunkel put on CD. And it's also got a little booklet in here that's got some wonderful photographs. It's almost like a miniaturized, coffee table book. So if you're a fan of Simon & Garfunkel and you still have a CD player, and I hope people who are watching this still have a CD player, get this, because this is a great thing to have. The albums that are on here, of course, are Wednesday Morning 3 a.m., which is their first album, largely acoustic, and a lot of covers of standards on that. They were just getting started. Wednesday Morning 3 a.m. It has the original version of Sounds of Silence on that album. It's, like I said, it's unplugged, acoustic. The second album is, of course, The Sounds of Silence, the album here. That's the second album. The third album, Parsley Sage, Rosemary and Thyme, which of course features Scarborough Fair. The next album is the Graduate soundtrack. That's actually on here, the Graduate soundtrack as well. Let me see if I can do a zoom in, if you can see that. Like I said, I don't know what the lighting is in here. I don't know. This could be a worthless video for all I know, because I got a new camera. Bookends is on here. Bookends is considered to be a classic. That's a real concept record for Simon & Garfunkel. That's got the studio hit version of Mrs. Robinson on it. And, of course, Bridge Over Troubled Water, which needs no introduction. That is one of the greatest albums of all time. That album, you can argue that a lot of their albums kind of have, are dated, especially this album here. They've got a song on here called "We've Got a Groovy Thing Going, Baby." Groovy. I mean, groovy is definitely something from the 60s. It's like a Brady Bunch or something. Whereas the Bridge Over Troubled Water album is not dated. You can listen to that anytime, and it still sounds fresh. It's got the greatest hits. This greatest hits album that was really popular in the 70s. It's on here. And it's got the live. It's got a bunch of live records. So the concert in Central Park from 1981. That was the big big comeback concert they did in Central Park. That's on here. Old Friends live on stage, which I think was done in the I want to say the 90s possibly. Anyway, that's on here. Live from New York City, 1967, and then Live 69. So you got a lot of live albums from Simon and Garfunkel. You've got all the studio albums, and you got the Graduate soundtrack. You can't miss with that. So I dare you to try to find all the stuff on Spotify or Tidal or Pandora or whatever you may be using. Anyway, Simon or Garfunkel, April Come She Will, April. Time to go to the wineries in April. Cross Keys in the Shenandoah Valley. Please do check them out. They are wonderful. Like I said, you don't need a reservation, but I would recommend getting there kind of early. Try to get there at 12:30 if you can. If you get there after 1 o'clock, especially in the springtime on a Saturday, you may have a hard time getting a spot. It's a very, like I said, extremely popular. It's almost like a winery in Northern Virginia. And by the way, the prices are pretty good. The prices are not over the top. A lot of the wineries are starting to kind of jack the prices up, I think, because of their overhead, and they're still getting out of the pandemic in many cases. But the wines here are average. This wine that I have in my hand, I think it was like $32, which is pretty good for a really good Virginia wine. So go to Cross Keys, listen to Simon and Garfunkel, April Come She Will, Blessed, the leaves that are green, that are green right now, but they will turn to brown. Anyway, that's it. Hope you enjoyed this, and I hope this footage came out okay. I'll see you next month.